I was enjoying a moment of peace in my room when my nephew entered. Our discourse began in a conventional manner, giving no hint of the turn events were about to take. However, he then behaved in a way that utterly astonished me, precipitating the most unforeseen moment of my existence. Let me take you back to where it all started. I was in the middle of scrolling through my phone when the knock came. At first, I thought it was just the usual, a polite tap from my nephew, Kyle, asking if I had seen his headphones, or maybe if I had the charger for his phone. But it was different this time. It wasn't a quick knock, but a hesitant one, slow and almost nervous. I couldn't help but wonder why. "Come in," I called out, setting my phone down on the nightstand. The door creaked open, and there he stood, Kyle, my sister's son. He was a good kid, smart, funny, respectful, but there was always a quiet edge to him, something that hinted he was carrying more than he let on. At this age, he was just starting to step out into the world in a more grown-up way. His body had changed, too, shifting from the lanky, awkward teenager I used to know into something more mature, with broad shoulders and an undeniable confidence that made my breath catch in my throat. I smiled, keeping my voice light, trying to keep the awkwardness at bay. "What's up, Kyle? Need something?" He hesitated, glancing at the floor, his eyes flitting back up to mine. Yeah. I was just wondering if I could talk to you for a minute." There was a nervousness in his tone that didn't match his usual self-assurance. It made me pause, wondering what was going on in that head of his. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair beside my bed. "Sit down. What's on your mind?" Kyle sat, but he didn't look me in the eye. Instead, his gaze kept darting to the window, then to his shoes, then back to the door. It was clear that something was bothering him, but I wasn't sure what. I folded my arms, waiting for him to gather his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than usual, almost hesitant. "I've been feeling kind of weird lately." "Weird how?" I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. He was 19, after all. The world was probably a confusing place at that age, but there was something about the way he was speaking that didn't sit right with me. "Just, with everything." Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "And with you?" He looked up at me briefly, his expression unreadable. "I don't know. Things feel off." I frowned slightly. Kyle and I had always gotten along well, but this was unexpected. We had never really talked about our relationship before, it had always been a sort of unspoken thing. I figured he saw me as an uncle, someone to rely on, but never someone to think too much about. But now, there it was, his unease, laid out in front of me, and I couldn't ignore it. "What do you mean, off?" I asked softly, my voice careful. He shifted again, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I don't know. It's just, lately, things feel different when I'm around you. I mean, they've always kind of felt that way, but I thought it was just in my head." His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, a vulnerability creeping in that I wasn't used to seeing from him. I didn't know how to respond. There was a weight to his words, something unspoken yet heavy. A strange tension had been lingering between us lately, and maybe I had been trying to ignore it, too. Kyle's lips pressed together, and he didn't say anything more for a long moment. Instead, he just sat there, his head hanging slightly, as if trying to find the words that would explain what was really bothering him. It made me want to reach out to him, to reassure him, but I didn't know how. After a long pause, Kyle stood up, his eyes meeting mine again, but this time with something darker in them, something intense that I couldn't quite place. "I don't know if this will help, but I just don't want things to stay the way they are," he said quietly, almost as if he were talking more to himself than to me. "I can't keep pretending everything is normal when it feels like everything's changing." I watched him, unsure of how to respond. The tension between us had shifted, and I could feel his uncertainty in every inch of me. "Kyle," I began, but before I could say anything else, he turned to leave, his shoulders tense, his footsteps quick and urgent as he headed back down the hallway. The door clicked shut behind him, and I sat there in the sudden silence of my room, feeling like I'd just missed something. Something important. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking, but the conversation lingered in my mind. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't figure out what. But the story wasn't over yet. What happened next left me frozen in a way I had never experienced before. The evening stretched on, with the house settling into its usual quiet rhythm. I tried to focus on something, anything, but my mind kept drifting back to Kyle, to his words, his nervous energy. I had never seen him so vulnerable, so unsure of himself, and I couldn't help but wonder if what he had said wasn't just about our relationship, if there was more to it, more than what I had been willing to admit. Hours later, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard another knock at my door. It was late, much later than usual. I hesitated before opening it, but something in the pit of my stomach told me it was Kyle again. I opened the door, and there he was, standing in the hallway, looking more unsure than ever. This time, his hands were trembling, and his face was flushed. "Uncle," he said softly, almost shyly. "Can I talk to you again?" I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. As he walked past me, his eyes never left the floor. "Of course," I said gently. "What's going on?" He swallowed hard, his gaze darting briefly to mine before looking away. I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low, almost trembling with emotion. I tilted my head, puzzled. "What is it, Kyle?" Before I could even process what was happening, Kyle's hand reached out, brushing against my arm as if testing the waters. The touch was brief, but it sent a shiver down my spine, a sudden rush of warmth that made my breath catch. I pulled back slightly, my heart hammering in my chest. His eyes met mine, wide with uncertainty, but also with something else, something that made my pulse race. "I don't know what's happening," Kyle whispered, his voice cracking as he stepped closer. "But I feel drawn to you. I can't explain it, but I just feel like there's something between us that I can't ignore anymore." I was frozen, unable to breathe, my mind screaming at me to stop this, to push him away, but somehow my body refused to listen. And that's when it happened, the moment that changed everything between us. He leaned in, his lips barely brushing against mine in the most unexpected, intimate way, and I was too stunned to pull away. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped him the moment his lips touched mine, but I didn't. Kyle's kiss was hesitant, unsure, like he himself couldn't believe what he was doing. And yet, there was something undeniable about it, something that sent my thoughts spiraling, making my heart pound in ways I didn't expect. The heat of his breath lingered as he pulled back slightly, searching my face, his eyes dark with uncertainty. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I don't know why." "Don't," I cut in, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was telling him not to apologize or telling myself not to give in. Kyle's hands hovered near mine, unsure, waiting for a reaction. The tension between us was unbearable, pressing down like a weight neither of us knew how to escape. My entire body felt like it was on fire, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know what the right thing to do was. "We can't," I finally muttered, stepping back. But even as I said it, my body protested, my mind screaming at me that the words felt wrong. Kyle swallowed, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said softly. But the way he looked at me, like he had just crossed a line he wasn't sure he wanted to step back from, told me that knowing didn't make a difference. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick, charged with something I didn't know how to define. Then, finally, Kyle exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "I should go," he murmured. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I wanted him to. "Yeah." He turned, his movements slow, like he was waiting for me to stop him. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hall. When the door clicked shut behind him, I finally let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were trembling, my chest tight with emotions I wasn't ready to face. Everything had changed, and I had no idea what to do about it. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the moment over and over again, the way Kyle's lips had barely touched mine, the way his breath had lingered against my skin, the hesitation, the tension, the undeniable pull between us. I told myself it was a mistake, that Kyle was just confused, that it didn't mean anything. But no matter how many times I tried to convince myself, my body knew the truth. The way my pulse had raced, the way my skin still burned where he had touched me, it meant everything. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I went about my routine as if nothing had happened, as if my world hadn't shifted in a way I didn't know how to handle. But the moment I saw Kyle sitting at the kitchen table, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly, I knew things were different. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes flickering with something unspoken. For a second, I thought he was going to say something, but instead, he just gave me a small, hesitant nod before turning his attention back to his cup. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to move past him to pour my own coffee, as if this was just another ordinary morning. But my hands weren't steady, and I knew he noticed. The silence between us stretched, heavy and unbearable. I needed to say something, anything, to make this normal again. "So, sleep well?" I asked, my voice too casual, too forced. Kyle let out a quiet breath, like he had been holding it in. "Not really." His fingers tapped against the side of his mug, restless, like he was debating something. Then, finally, he glanced up at me, his expression cautious. "You?" I hesitated. "Not really." His lips pressed together, his grip tightening around his mug. He looked like he wanted to say something, like he was weighing whether or not to bring up the thing neither of us were willing to name. And then, finally. "About last night," he started. I tensed, my stomach twisting. "Kyle." "I know," he interrupted, shaking his head. "I know what you're going to say. That it was a mistake, that it shouldn't have happened." His voice was steady, but I could hear the strain underneath. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my coffee cup. "Wasn't it?" Kyle stared at me for a long moment before he exhaled, running a hand down his face. "I don't know," he admitted. I don't think it felt wrong." My breath hitched, my heart slamming against my ribs. It would have been easier if he had just agreed with me, if he had laughed it off, said it was nothing, let me bury it the way I wanted to. But instead, he was standing here in front of me, telling me that he felt it, too. And suddenly, I didn't know what to do with that. Kyle's words hung between us, heavy and undeniable. I should have shut it down right then and there, told him he was wrong, that what happened didn't mean anything. But the problem was, I didn't believe that myself. I let out a slow breath, placing my coffee down on the counter. "Kyle, I don't know what you want me to say." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know either," he admitted. I can't pretend like it didn't happen." I looked away, my chest tight. "Maybe that's exactly what we should do." Kyle exhaled sharply, like he was frustrated, but not at me, at himself. "And is that what you want?" His voice was quieter now, hesitant, searching. I opened my mouth to say yes, to end this before it spiraled any further, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Kyle took a step closer. I felt it before I saw it, the shift in the air, the quiet weight of his presence. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, my breath hitching as I fought the overwhelming pull between us. "I need to know," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Was it really a mistake?" I swallowed hard. My pulse was racing, my skin burning under the weight of his gaze. Every logical part of me was screaming to push him away, to put space between us before we crossed another line we couldn't come back from. But the part of me that had never stopped thinking about last night, that part was screaming something else entirely. Kyle must have seen the hesitation in my eyes, because before I could make up my mind, his fingers brushed against mine, tended, barely there, like he was testing the waters. I didn't move away. His breath hitched. "Say the word," he said, his voice rough-edged with something desperate. "Tell me to stop, and I will." I wanted to. I wanted to end this before it got any more complicated, before I lost control of something I wasn't sure I could handle. But I didn't say anything. And Kyle took that as an answer. His hand slid fully over mine, warm and steady, his fingers tightening just enough for me to feel the weight of it. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought he could probably hear it, but I still couldn't move, couldn't think past the rush of emotions flooding my system. Then, slowly, carefully, he leaned in. I should have stopped him, but I didn't. And when his lips met mine for the second time, I knew there was no going back. Kyle's lips were soft against mine, hesitant but insistent, like he was still testing the line between uncertainty and conviction. The moment stretched, slow and intoxicating, as if we were both holding our breath, waiting for the world to crash around us. I should have pulled away, should have stopped this before it spiraled further, but the warmth of his hand against mine, the way his breath mixed with mine, it made me forget all the reasons I told myself this was wrong. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, his breath uneven. "Tell me this isn't real," he whispered. "Tell me you don't feel it, too." I clenched my jaw, closing my eyes, because looking at him, seeing the quiet hope in his expression, was too much. "Kyle, this is complicated," I murmured. "So," he pulled back slightly, his gaze searching mine. "Why does it have to be?" I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Because it just is." Kyle exhaled, his fingers flexing against mine like he didn't want to let go. "I don't care," he admitted. "I don't care if it's complicated. I just know that I want you, and I know you want me, too." His words sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't wrong. That was the problem. I took a step back, putting space between us, because if I didn't, I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist him. "We need to think," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Kyle studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow nod, he whispered, "Okay." But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't letting this go. As he turned to leave, my body screamed at me to stop him, to pull him back and forget the weight of reality. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, watching him disappear down the hall, knowing that whatever this was, whatever we had just set into motion, wasn't over. And that terrified me. The rest of the day passed in a blur, but I wasn't really present in any of it. My mind was trapped in that moment with Kyle, replaying every detail, the way his lips felt, the way his breath mixed with mine, the way his voice trembled when he told me he wanted me. I kept telling myself I needed to move past it, that it was a mistake that should never happen again, but my body refused to listen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. Every time I was alone, I felt the phantom warmth of his touch. By the time night rolled around, the house was quiet. I had spent most of the evening avoiding Kyle, keeping myself busy with anything that would distract me. But I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. The weight of everything left unsaid was suffocating, pressing against my chest with every passing second. I told myself I needed to be strong, to set boundaries, but I knew deep down that I had already crossed them the moment I let him kiss me. I had just settled into bed, the dim glow of my bedside lamp casting soft shadows across the room, when another knock came at my door. My stomach clenched immediately, because I already knew who it was. I could have ignored it, pretended to be asleep, but my body betrayed me. Before I even had time to think, I was already standing, already reaching for the doorknob. Kyle stood there, his expression unreadable, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his hoodie. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the silence stretching between us like an invisible thread, fragile and unbreakable at the same time. Then, finally, he let out a breath and murmured, "Can I come in?" I hesitated for only a second before stepping aside. He walked in, his movements slow, measured, like he wasn't sure what he was doing here either. I closed the door behind him, leaning against it for support, because my legs suddenly felt weak. He stood in the middle of the room, not looking at me at first, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers flexed at his sides like he was holding something back. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. I swallowed hard. "Me neither." He finally looked at me then, and the intensity in his eyes sent a shiver down my spine. Are we just going to pretend like nothing happened? I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what we're supposed to do. Kyle took a step closer, just enough for me to feel the heat radiating off his body. Then let's stop thinking about it, he murmured. Just for a little while. It was dangerous, the way he said it, the way his voice wrapped around me like a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. My breath hitched as his fingers brushed against mine. Not by accident, not hesitantly. This time, it was deliberate, slow, and it sent a spark racing up my arm, setting my whole body on edge. I could have stopped him. I should have stopped him. But instead, I let my fingers tighten around his, let the warmth seep into my skin as he stepped even closer, his breath ghosting over my lips. Then, just like before, he kissed me, and this time, I didn't hesitate. Kyle's kiss wasn't hesitant this time. It was slow but certain, filled with an unspoken understanding between us, one that neither of us dared to put into words. His lips moved against mine with quiet urgency, testing, searching, as if waiting for me to push him away. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled him closer, my hands gripping the fabric of his hoodie, grounding myself in the heat of him. Everything else faded, the uncertainty, the conflict, the voice in the back of my mind telling me this was dangerous. Right now, the only thing that existed was him, the warmth of his breath, the way his hands ghosted over my sides like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch me but couldn't help himself. I should have pulled away, set boundaries before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross, but the moment his fingers curled at the hem of my shirt, a quiet plea in his touch, I knew there was no stopping this now. When we finally parted, I barely had time to catch my breath before Kyle whispered, "I don't want to pretend anymore." His forehead rested against mine, his breathing heavy, his hands still gripping me as if letting go would break something between us. I could feel the tension in his body, the restraint it took for him to hold back, and something in me ached at the thought of him doubting how much I wanted this, too. I swallowed hard, closing my eyes for a second. Neither do I. The words slipped out before I could stop them, but I knew they were the truth. Kyle exhaled, a sound almost like relief, but there was still hesitation in the way he looked at me. "Then tell me we're not making a mistake." I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came because I didn't know. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we were setting ourselves up for something we wouldn't be able to handle. But standing here, feeling the way his fingers trembled slightly against my skin, knowing he was just as lost in this as I was, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Instead of answering, I cupped his face, running my thumb over his jawline, memorizing the warmth of him, the way his breath hitched under my touch. That was all the answer he needed. Kyle leaned in again, capturing my lips in another kiss, this one deeper, more certain. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer, and I let him. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to fight what I was feeling. I wanted him. Kyle's hands moved slowly, deliberately, as if he were afraid this moment would slip away if he didn't hold onto it carefully enough. His fingertips grazed my sides, hesitant but filled with intent, and each touch sent a quiet shiver through me. The weight of what we were doing should have pressed down on me, should have made me stop before we lost ourselves completely. But all I could focus on was him, the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of his hoodie, the way his breath caught each time I moved even the slightest bit closer. His touch traced my arms, muscles tense with restraint. His eyes searched mine, a silent question. In my dim room, we hovered between retreat and surrender. "I don't want to ruin this," Kyle murmured, his voice rough. "You're not," I whispered, needing him to believe it. He swallowed, fingers tightening on my waist. "I can't stop wanting this." His words echoed my own feelings. His forehead pressed to mine, breath warm. "Tell me to stop," he breathed. "I can't," I whispered, his lips met mine, deeper, sure. All hesitation vanished. He pulled me close, and I let him, his grip tightened, heat surged. Every inch of me felt him. Restraint was gone. It was real, unstoppable, his kiss deepened, memorizing. His hands slid up my sides, a shiver of need. Consequences faded, lost in his touch, breathless, foreheads touching. Kyle closed his eyes. I don't know where this leaves us, I admitted. Me neither, he murmured. But I don't want to stop. This is complicated, I said weakly. I don't care. I just want to be with you. Unspoken desire hung in the air. I didn't know the future, but I wouldn't let him go. The days unraveled. The thrill became a burden. We couldn't go back. Hope dwindled. One evening, I found him distant. His eyes held something broken. I think we made a mistake, he murmured. Kyle, I've been thinking, there's no next. He chuckled bitterly. This doesn't end well. I knew he was right. Kyle, I don't. I faltered, unable to deny the truth. He smiled sadly. We'll always have that night. He stood, hesitating briefly. Kyle,